The cold hit my scalp before my mind caught up to what my hand was touching. No hair, just skin, smooth and foreign under my fingers, where thick, gray-streaked coils had been the night before. My heart slammed once, hard, and I lay there in the dark, not moving, like stillness could undo it. My name is Fredonia Broussard, and on the morning my stepdaughter was set to marry, I woke up bald, in my own bed. I sat up slow, reached for the lamp. The light hit the pillow beside mine, and I saw it, a folded square of paper, her handwriting, unmistakable, even in a hurry. I didn't cry when I read it. I want to say I did, because that's what you'd expect from a woman in my position. But I didn't. I just went still in a different way, quieter, colder. Now that you look really ugly, stay away from my wedding. I read it twice, then a third time, like the words might rearrange themselves into something less true. If you're watching this right now, tell me where you're tuning in from. I always like to know who's sitting with me through mornings like this one. I didn't scream. I didn't wake the house. I sat on the edge of that bed, with the note in my lap and my bare head catching the hallway light, and I made myself breathe the way I'd learned to breathe through worse things than this. Grief teaches you that. So does 30 years of being the one who holds a family together while it quietly decides you don't belong to it. The door opened. Cleophas stood there in his undershirt, tie already draped over his shoulder for later. And for 1/2 second, I let myself believe his face would do what a husband's face is supposed to do. It didn't. He looked at my head, looked at the note in my hand, and he laughed, short, surprised, the kind of laugh a man lets out before he remembers he's supposed to care. Lord, Fredonia. He rubbed his jaw. You can't be walking around like that today of all days. Not, are you hurt? Not what happened to you. Just the day. Always the day. She shaved my head, Cleophas. My voice came out flatter than I expected. While I was asleep in my own home. I heard you. He glanced at his watch. We'll talk about it after. Avril's got enough on her plate without what? I said it soft, not a question. I wasn't asking him anything anymore. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. 12 years I'd spent waiting for this man to choose me in some small, ordinary moment. And here it was, laid out plain as the note in my lap. He wasn't going to. Not today. Maybe not ever. Something in me went quiet in a way that felt less like breaking and more like arriving somewhere. I stood up, walked past him into the bathroom, and looked at myself in the mirror. Skin bare where hair should have been, eyes steady in a way that surprised me. I didn't reach for a wig. I didn't reach for tears. I reached for my phone. I opened the camera first, turned it on myself, on the note still folded in my other hand, and I took the picture slow and deliberate, like I already knew I'd need it for something more than remembering. Then I opened my contacts, found the one name I hadn't expected to need this morning, and I pressed call. The line rang twice before he picked up, and I could hear the noise behind him already. Car doors, someone laughing, a morning already moving toward a wedding that hadn't happened yet. Fredonia! Garland's voice was bright, rushed. I'm about 20 minutes out. Everything good on your end? No. I kept my voice even. It's not. The noise behind him dropped. I heard a car door shut, his footsteps slow. Avril drugged my wine last night, I said. I woke up with my head shaved. There was a note on my pillow telling me to stay away from her wedding. Silence. Not the polite kind. The kind that stretches until it becomes its own sound. Fredonia, that's... He stopped himself. You're sure it was her? I didn't flinch at the question. I understood it. 2 times before this one, he'd come to me shaking with doubt about marrying her, And 2 times I'd been the one telling him to hold on, that people grow, that grief does strange things to a person's heart. I'd spent 2 years being his reason to stay. "I'm not asking you to believe me because you trust me," I said. "I'm asking you to look." I pulled the phone away from my ear, found the photo, and sent it before I could talk myself out of it. My bare scalp under the bathroom light, the note held open beside it, her handwriting plain as anything. I put the phone back to my ear and waited. It came through. I heard the small chime on his end, then nothing. Then the sound of him breathing like he'd forgotten how for a second. "Oh my God." His voice had changed completely. No rush left in it, just something flat and disbelieving. "Fredonia, I know. I need you to say it again. Slow." Not because he doubted me anymore, because some part of him was still trying to find a version of this that didn't mean what it meant. "She did this to me the night before her own wedding," I said, "and then she told me to stay away from it." He didn't answer right away. I could hear him moving now, quick, a door opening somewhere on his end. 2 times, he said finally, quiet. 2 times I came to you telling you I didn't know if I could marry her. And both times you told me to stay. You told me people change. I know what I told you. Were you wrong? I let that sit for a second before I answered, because it deserved the weight of an honest answer, not a fast one. "Yes," I said. "I was wrong. I wanted to believe it more than I actually did." Another silence, shorter this time, and I could hear something settle in him on the other end. Not anger, not yet. Just a decision arriving. "I'm not walking anybody down any aisle today," he said. "Not after this. Garland, I mean it, Fredonia. I've spent 2 years asking you if I was seeing things clearly, and you kept telling me to wait. I'm done waiting." A car door slammed on his end, an engine starting. "I'm coming to find you first. Before I go anywhere near that venue, I need to see you with my own eyes." I didn't try to talk him out of it. Some part of me had known, since the moment I opened that camera app before I even dialed his number, that this call was never going to end any other way. "I'll be ready," I said. He hung up without another word, and I sat there in the quiet of my bathroom, phone still warm in my hand, understanding for the first time that whatever was about to happen at that venue was no longer something I could control or needed to. I heard the quartet before I saw the building, strings warming up, cheerful and oblivious, drifting out over a parking lot full of cars I recognized from 30 years of this family's gatherings. I wrapped my head before I got out of the car, not out of shame, out of instinct, the same way you cover a wound before walking into a room full of people who won't know what to do with the sight of it. Garland was already outside when I stepped out, pacing near the entrance in his unbuttoned jacket, tie loose like he hadn't had the heart to finish dressing. He turned when he heard my door shut, and I watched his face do something I hadn't expected. Not shock, exactly. Confirmation. Like the photo on his phone had only been the outline, and now he was filling it in with his own eyes. He crossed the lot fast, took both my hands, and just looked at me for a moment without saying anything. "I need you to wait right here," he said finally. "I have to talk to the officiant before anybody walks anywhere." I nodded. I didn't ask him what he was going to say. Some part of me already knew he'd carried the answer with him the whole drive over. He didn't make it to the officiant. Avril came around the side entrance in her dress, veil still pinned half up, and stopped when she saw him standing with me instead of coming inside. I watched her read the room in half a second, my head wrap, his face, the distance between us and the doors. "What is this?" Her voice came out light, performing calm for the small cluster of cousins drifting toward the entrance behind her. "Garland, we're about to start." "We're not starting anything." He didn't raise his voice. That was the part that undid her, I think. That he said it so plainly, like a man reading off a fact instead of picking a fight. Can we not do this right now in front of, you drugged your stepmother's wine last night? He said it clean, no shake in it. You shaved her head while she was asleep in her own house and left her a note telling her to stay away from your wedding. The quartet kept playing for 3 more seconds before someone inside noticed and the music stumbled to a stop. Avril's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since I'd known her, I watched her reach for the practiced calm she always wore like a second skin, and come up, empty-handed. That's not... You don't understand what actually... I understand exactly what happened. Garland's voice softened, just slightly. Not for her sake, but like he was tired of pretending otherwise. This isn't the first time I've had doubts about marrying you. It's just the first time I've had proof I couldn't talk myself out of. Her composure cracked then, right there in front of her cousins and her aunties and the wedding planner frozen by the guest book. Not tears. Not yet. Just a flicker of something raw and unrehearsed crossing her face before she caught it. You're doing this here? Her voice climbed half an octave. In front of everybody? You did what you did in front of nobody, he said. I'm not going to pretend I didn't see it. Behind them, I saw heads turning inside the chapel doors, guests half risen from their seats, a low current of whispers already moving row to row, faster than anyone could explain it. Someone's chair scraped back. A woman's voice, sharp with confusion, cut through the murmurs. Is the wedding happening or not? And nobody answered her, because nobody standing in that doorway knew yet how to say what had just come apart in front of them. The lights in that waiting room buzzed in a way that made everything feel too bright and too far away at the same time, like I was watching myself sit in that plastic chair instead of actually sitting in it. Garland had driven me straight there from the venue, no arguing about it, and stayed until the nurse called me back, promising he'd be in the hallway when I came out. I believed him. That was new. Believing a man's word without bracing myself for the gap between what he said and what he'd do. The nurse taking my vitals barely looked up from her clipboard. Any dizziness, nausea, blurred vision. All 3, I said. Since I woke up. She nodded like she'd heard it before, wrote something down, and told me the doctor wanted blood work and a toxicology panel before anything else. Specifically a sedative screen, given how deep and disoriented the sleep had been. A sedative screen, I repeated. Standard, when we can't explain the disorientation any other way. She didn't look up. It'll tell us what's in your system and roughly how much. Won't tell us how it got there, but it's a start. I sat with that a moment. It'll tell us what, not who. I understood. Sitting under those fluorescent lights with my scalp bare under a paper gown, that a number on a lab report wasn't going to be enough by itself. Somebody had to have seen something. Somebody had to remember a glass, a moment, a reason. My phone buzzed against my thigh. Cleophas. Avril's a wreck. Whole family asking questions. Can we please just let this settle down before it turns into something bigger? I read it twice. Same as I'd read the note on my pillow that morning, waiting for it to rearrange into something I could forgive. It didn't. I typed back 3 words. I'm at the hospital. His reply came fast. Are you okay? Are you calm? Not what did they say? Not do you need me there? Calm. Like the only thing that mattered to him right now was whether I was going to make this morning harder for everyone else. I set the phone face down on my lap. Something in my chest had been loud since I opened my eyes that morning. A kind of ringing, high and constant. Grief and shock tangled together so tight, I couldn't tell where one ended. Sitting in that chair, reading his text a second time, I felt it change pitch. Quieter. Sharper. He wasn't asking if I was hurt. He was asking if I was manageable. I thought about the 2 years I'd spent managing everyone else's feelings in that family. Smoothing Avril's moods, defending her to Garland, absorbing Cleophas's silences like they were mine to carry. I thought about how easily I'd have answered, "I'm fine," 6 months ago, just to keep the peace. I didn't answer him at all. Instead, I sat there, running the morning back in my mind slower than I had time to before. The note, the laugh, the drive over, Avril's face cracking in that doorway. And I noticed, really noticed, how many small things I'd let pass over the years without asking why. A missing bottle of wine days before, a comment Avril made at the tasting that I'd brushed off as nerves, things that made more sense now, lined up end to end, than they ever had scattered. The nurse pulled the curtain back before I could finish the thought. "Mrs. Broussard?" A different voice this time, uniformed, notepad already in hand. "I'm Officer Danvers. I understand you'd like to file a statement." Officer Danvers had a way of asking questions that made me feel like I was handing over pieces of myself one at a time, laid flat on a table between us. "Walk me through last night," he said. "Pen ready. Start with the dinner." I told him about the rehearsal, about Avril bringing me a glass of wine I hadn't asked for, about the fog that came after and the nothing that followed until I woke with my head bare and a note on my pillow. He wrote without looking up much, nodding at certain parts, pausing longer at others. "And you still have the note?" "In my purse." He held out a gloved hand and I passed him the folded paper like I was handing over something that had been sitting against my ribs all day. He slid it into a clear bag, sealed it, wrote a case number across the top in block letters. "We'll need this for handwriting comparison," he said, "along with your blood work once it's back." So, this is real now. I hadn't meant to say it out loud. Official. "I'm opening a complaint for battery and involuntary drugging," he said. "Against Avril Redmond, based on what you've described and what the ER's already noted." Something in my shoulders loosened hearing her name said plainly, attached to a word like complaint, like battery. Instead of just a story I'd been carrying alone since sunrise. For a moment, it felt like enough. "The toxicology will confirm something was in your system," he said, watching my face like he could see the relief settling in and wanted to catch it before it went too far. "It won't tell us who put it there." "I don't understand." "A screen shows what's in your blood. It doesn't show whose hands poured it." He closed his notepad. "If this goes anywhere, we'll need more than the results. Somebody who saw something, a text, a receipt, anything that ties her to the glass itself." I sat with that a moment. The ease I'd felt seconds ago curdling into something heavier. So her word against mine isn't enough. "It's rarely enough for anybody," he said, not unkindly. "That's just how these things go." He left me his card and a case number and told me someone would follow up once the labs came back. I sat alone in that curtained-off space a while after he'd gone, turning the same thought over the way you turn a stone in your pocket. That I couldn't just hand this to the law and walk away. I was going to have to build it myself, piece by piece. The same way I'd built everything else in that family that anybody ever bothered to thank me for. I started running back through the rehearsal dinner slower than I had in the hospital chair, the kitchen, the noise, who'd been where when the wine was poured. And that's when it landed. Small and sharp, the way the truest things always do. My cousin Odalis had been in that kitchen the whole evening, helping plate desserts, close enough to the counter where the bottles sat lined up before dinner started. She might have seen something. She might not even know what she saw. I reached for my phone, already deciding I wasn't going to wait for anyone else to ask her first. Odalis didn't pick up the first time I called, or the second. On the third try, she answered with her voice pitched low, like she was somewhere she didn't want to be overheard. Fredonia, I heard about the wedding. Are you all right? I need to ask you something about last night, I said. The rehearsal dinner. You were in the kitchen most of the evening, plating desserts. A pause, longer than it should have been for a simple yes. I was. Did you see Avril near the wine before it was poured? The silence stretched again, and I could hear her breathing shift, the sound of a door closing somewhere on her end. Why does that matter? Because I woke up drugged, Odalis. Somebody put something in my glass, and I need to know if you saw who. I don't want to start something, she said, quieter now. You know how this family gets. I don't want to be the one who… You don't have to be anything, I said. I just need to know what you saw. Another pause, and then, like something in her finally gave way under the weight of it. She was by the bottles for a few minutes before dinner. I didn't think anything of it at the time. People go in and out of that kitchen. Relief moved through me, quiet and careful. The kind you don't let show too much because you know it isn't finished yet. Did you see her do anything to my glass specifically? No, Odalis said. Not directly, but… She stopped herself. But what? She said something to me, a few days before. I didn't think much of it then. Her voice dropped further. She said, Fredonia's not going to ruin my day like she thinks she's going to. I asked her what that meant, and she just laughed it off. Said I was reading too much into it. I sat with that for a moment, the words settling into place beside everything else I'd already gathered. The note, the wine, the laugh Cleophas gave me that morning like none of it surprised him. A few days before, not a decision made, in anger the night of. A decision made in advance, sat with, planned around. She didn't snap, I said, half to myself. She built this. Fredonia, I don't want any part of… I know, I said, and I meant it. I'm not going to make you do anything you don't want to do. I just needed to hear it from somebody who was actually there. We hung up soon after, her still uneasy, me sitting with a stillness that had shifted texture again. Less shock now, more architecture. If Avril had said something like that days before the dinner, planned it out with enough time to think it through, then whatever came next couldn't just be me reacting anymore. It had to be built with the same patience she'd used to plan it. I thought about Cleophas's silence, about the note, about a toxicology report that would only ever tell half a story. I thought about the officer's words, somebody who saw something and understood, sitting alone in my kitchen with my head still bare under the morning light, that I had exactly that now. Not enough yet, but a start. I opened my phone and searched for something I never thought I'd need to look for in my own home. A family law attorney who also handled personal injury. Verlinda Lofton's office smelled like coffee and old paper, and she didn't waste time on sympathy before she got down to business. Tell me everything, she said, pen already uncapped. Don't leave out what feels small. I told her all of it. The wine, the note, Cleophas's laugh, the officer's warning about toxicology, Odalis's remark about the kitchen, the comment Avril made days before any of it happened. Verlinda wrote in short bursts, stopping me twice to ask exact wording, nothing more. When I finished, she set her pen down. The criminal complaint is a start, she said, but it moves slow and it's not the only door open to you. What else is there? A civil suit, battery, specifically. Georgia gives you 2 years to file it, no cap on what you can be awarded. And given what she did, the deliberateness of it, you could be looking at punitive damages on top of everything else. And Cleophas? Something shifted in her face, careful now, like she was choosing her words to land right the first time. That one's harder. Why? Georgia still protects spouses from suing each other for personal injury. And that's not just physical harm. It covers intentional emotional harm too, not just a blow to the body. She folded her hands. Doesn't matter what he did or didn't do. As long as you're legally married, the law assumes there's a marriage worth protecting, and it won't let you sue him for how he handled that morning. I felt something in my chest tighten, familiar in a way I didn't like. So he laughs at me, does nothing, and there's no answer for that. I didn't say there's no answer. She leaned forward. I said, the answer isn't a lawsuit while you're still married to him. Then what is it? You file for divorce. I sat back, the words landing slower than they should have. That's it? That's the answer? The law only protects a marriage it believes still has something worth protecting, Verlinda said. Once you file, once there's no more harmony left to shield, that protection falls away. That's when a claim against him for what he did, the dismissiveness, whatever he knew beforehand and sat on, actually has room to breathe. So I have to end my marriage to be allowed to hold him accountable for it. Essentially, yes. I looked down at my hands, at the ring I'd worn 12 years, and felt something settle that wasn't quite grief and wasn't quite relief either, somewhere between the two. I didn't come in here planning to end my marriage, I said. I came in here trying to understand what happened to my head. I know. Verlinda's voice softened, just slightly. But you're not the same woman who woke up yesterday morning, Fredonia. You've been building a case since sunrise, whether you meant to or not. This is just the next piece of it. She was right, and some part of me had known it since the drive to O'Dallas's silence on the phone the night before. That whatever came next wasn't going to come from anger. It was going to come from patience, laid brick by brick, the same way Avril had built her own plan days in advance. All right, I said. Walk me through what filing looks like. She did, in plain terms, no wasted words. And by the time I left her office, the sun had shifted low enough to throw long shadows across the parking lot. I sat in my car a while before starting the engine, turning over one question I hadn't answered yet. Whether I told Cleophas what was coming before I filed, or let the papers do the talking for me. I left the papers on the kitchen table on purpose, right where he'd see them before his coffee finished brewing. I was upstairs when I heard the chair scrape back too fast, then his footsteps coming up two at a time. He appeared in the bedroom doorway, holding the folder like it might bite him. What is this? You can read, Cleophas. Divorce papers. He said it like the word itself was an accusation. You filed for divorce. I did. He stood there a moment, and I watched disbelief move across his face and curdle into something sharper. You didn't think to talk to me first? After 12 years. You just... I talked to you the morning it happened. My voice stayed even. You laughed. That's not fair. It's exactly fair. I turned to face him fully. I told you my head was shaved. I told you your daughter did it. And you asked me if I was calm. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I panicked. That's not the same as not caring. You've had days now. I let that sit a second. You still haven't asked me how I'm actually doing. Not once. Something flickered across his face, the beginning of an answer he didn't finish. Fredonia, please. His voice dropped softer now, reaching for the tone that used to work on me. Let's not do something we can't take back over one bad morning. It wasn't one morning. I kept my voice level, kept it plain, because I'd promised myself I'd say this once and only once. O'Dallas told me Avril said something days before the wedding, about making sure I didn't ruin her day. Days, Cleophas. Not a moment of panic. A plan. He went very still. And I remember your phone lighting up on the counter that same week, I said. A text from her. You turned it face down before I could read it. And you never mentioned what it said. I didn't think anything of it then. I think about it now. That doesn't mean I'm not finished. I held his gaze. I think you knew something. Not everything, but something. I think she said enough to you beforehand that some part of you wasn't surprised when you walked in and saw my head that morning. And I think you've been telling yourself it's easier not to ask her what she meant, because asking would mean choosing between us. That's not... His voice cracked slightly, the first real crack I'd heard from him since this started. You don't know what you're talking about. Then tell me I'm wrong. I held his gaze. Tell me plainly, Cleophas. Did she say anything to you before that morning? Anything at all? The silence that followed went on long enough that it answered the question better than any words could have. I'm not doing this right now, he said finally, voice low, and turned toward the door. That's not a no. He stopped in the doorway, back to me, shoulders tight. I'm not doing this right now, he said again, and walked out, footsteps heavy on the stairs, the front door closing hard enough to rattle the window in its frame a moment later. I stood alone in the room we'd shared for 12 years, the folder still sitting open on the dresser where he'd set it down. And I understood something settling into place that felt less like anger now and more like clarity. He hadn't denied it. He'd just left the room instead. I picked up my phone and called Verlinda. It's filed, I said. And I think he just told me everything I needed to know without saying a single word. The envelope came thick and official, a law firm's name embossed across the corner, and something in my stomach dropped before I'd even opened it. I called Verlinda before I finished reading the second page. They're threatening defamation, I said. Says I've been telling people things that damage Avril's reputation. Says if I don't stop discussing this with family, they'll pursue it. Read me the exact language. I did. Slow. My hands not quite steady on the paper. That's weak, Verlinda said after a pause. For defamation to hold, what you're saying has to be false. Everything you've told anyone is documented. The ER visit, the police report, the note. They know that. Then why send it? Because it costs them nothing to try, and it costs you something every time you have to think twice before you speak. Her voice stayed even, unhurried. This isn't really about winning a defamation case, Fredonia. It's about making you go quiet before anyone else asks questions. So what do? You say less. Not because you're guilty of anything. Because anything you say to family right now can get twisted into proof of the very thing they're accusing you of. I sat with that after we hung up, turning her words over the way you turn over a stone that's heavier than it looks. Say less. After a lifetime of smoothing things over with careful words, now the safest thing I could do was offer none at all. I understood, sitting at my kitchen table with that letter in front of me, what this really was. Avril wasn't just defending herself. She was trying to get ahead of the story before it could be told the way it actually happened. One more thing planned in advance, dressed up as an accident. Sunday came before I'd fully settled into the new quiet I was supposed to be keeping. I went to church out of habit more than comfort, sat near the back, kept my head down through the service. It was in the parking lot after gathering my keys from my purse that my husband's sister, Cassandra, caught up to me, arms crossed before she even reached me. Fredonia! Her voice had an edge I recognized from every family gathering where somebody wanted to say something ugly and call it concern. We need to talk. About what? About you dragging this family's business through the mud." She glanced around like she was checking who might hear. "Avril's an emotional wreck. Cleophas can't sleep. And you're out here telling anybody who'll listen that she drugged you, like this is some talk show." "I haven't told anybody anything that isn't documented, Cassandra." "That's not what I'm hearing." Her jaw tightened. "I'm hearing you're planning to sue your own husband, sue his daughter, air every bit of this out in public like the rest of us don't have to live with the fallout." I felt the old instinct rise in me to explain, to soften it, to make her understand so she wouldn't be upset with me. I felt my mouth open around the beginning of a sentence. Then I closed it. "I hear you," I said instead, and nothing more. Cassandra stared at me like she'd expected more of a fight, like my silence unsettled her more than an argument would have. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" I didn't answer that either. I just held her gaze, got in my car, and drove away, leaving her standing in that parking lot with a conversation she'd clearly rehearsed and nobody left to have it with. The Sunday dinner had been on the calendar for months, long before any of this happened, and I almost didn't go. I went anyway. Some part of me still believed showing up counted for something in that family, even now. The table was full, aunties, cousins, a few of Cleophas's siblings. And the conversation moved around me like water around a stone. Somebody asked about the weather. Somebody else brought up a cousin's new job. Nobody said Avril's name. Nobody said mine either, not really. Not in any way that required looking at me directly. I passed the greens. I answered when spoken to. And I felt, for the first time in 12 years at that table, like a guest in a house I'd helped build. Cleophas sat 2 seats down, eyes on his plate the whole meal. Not once did he meet my gaze. Not once did anyone ask how I was healing, whether my head still ached in the mornings, whether I'd slept. It was as if the wedding day itself had become the one thing too dangerous to acknowledge, and my presence at that table was tolerated only as long as I kept it that way too. I was rinsing dishes at the sink, alone, when Odalis came up beside me with a dish towel in her hands, not really drying anything. "Can we talk outside a minute?" We stood on the back porch in the cold, her arms wrapped tight around herself, eyes darting toward the kitchen window like she expected someone to be watching. "My mother called me last night," she said, voice low. "Told me I need to think real hard before I say anything to anybody about that night." "Your mother." She said family doesn't testify against family. Said whatever happened, it's not worth tearing everybody apart over. Odalis looked down at her hands. She said, "If I say what I saw, out loud, in a deposition or wherever this ends up, I'm the one who broke this family, not Avril, me." I felt something in my chest go tight, a familiar cold creeping in that had nothing to do with the porch air. "Odalis, what you saw is the difference between this ending in nothing and this ending in something. I know that." Her voice cracked slightly. "I do. But you don't understand what it's like being the one everybody looks at different for the rest of your life. You've got Verlinda. You've got the police report. I've just got my mother's voice in my head every time I think about picking up that phone." I didn't argue with her. I understood, standing there in the cold, that pushing her right then would only prove her mother right. That speaking up costs something. That loyalty gets punished faster than silence ever does. "I'm not going to make you do anything," I said, "but I need you to know what happens if you don't. Officer Danvers told me the toxicology alone isn't enough. Without you, there might not be enough to prove any of this actually happened the way it did." Odalis was quiet a long moment, looking out over the dark yard instead of at me. "I need time," she said finally. "I'm not saying no. I need time to figure out who I am in this before I decide what I'm willing to lose. She went back inside before I could answer, leaving me alone on that porch with the cold settling deeper into my bones than the night air alone could explain, understanding for the first time just how easily this whole case could come apart from somewhere I'd never thought to guard. The certified letter sat on the counter for 2 days before I finally opened it, some part of me already knowing what it would say before I read a word. Final balance due, catering, remaining 15%, contract signed under my name, $2,300 due within 10 days, or the vendor would pursue collection. Cleophas found me standing over it that evening, reading it a third time. "That's the Delacroix invoice," he said, glancing at it like it was nothing more than a bill among bills. "Just handle it, like you always do. I'll pay you back once things settle." The old version of me would have already reached for my checkbook. I felt that old instinct rise, familiar as breathing, the automatic pull toward smoothing things over before anyone had to feel the weight of them. I didn't move. "I'm not paying this." He blinked, like the words hadn't quite landed right. "Fredonia, it's a couple $1,000s. It's not worth a fight." "It's not a fight. It's a contract with my name on it, for a wedding that didn't happen, for a family that shaved my head the night before it was supposed to." I set the letter down flat on the counter. "I've been paying for things in this family for 12 years. I'm not paying for this one." "You're being vindictive." His voice sharpened, the first real edge I'd heard from him since the filing. "This isn't about the wedding anymore, is it? This is about punishing everybody." "No," I said, and my voice stayed even, steady in a way that surprised even me. "This is about the first time in 12 years I've said no to something and meant it." He stood there a moment, mouth working like he wanted to argue further, then didn't. He'd never had to argue with me before. I'd always just paid, always just handled it, always just absorbed whatever needed absorbing so the rest of the family didn't have to feel the cost. He didn't know what to do with a version of me that wouldn't. He left the kitchen without another word. I picked the letter back up once he was gone, smoothed it flat against the counter, and photographed it the same way I'd photographed my scalp and the note on that first morning. Then I forwarded it straight to Verlinda with a short message. "This is in my name. I'm not paying it. Wanted you to have it on record." Her reply came within the hour. "Good. That's exactly the kind of thing that belongs in the file, not your checkbook. I'm adding this to the damages column on the civil claim. It's not separate from what she owes you. It's part of it." I sat with that a long moment after, feeling something settle in me that was smaller than the relief of the police report, quieter than the clarity of the divorce filing, but real all the same. A boundary, plain and small, the first one I'd held all the way through without bending halfway back. My phone rang before I'd even set it down. Verlinda's name on the screen. "I need to talk to you about Odalis," she said. No preamble, her voice carrying a weight I hadn't heard from her before. "Something's come up." I drove to Odalis's place, expecting to have to convince her of something. I didn't get the chance. She opened the door before I'd finished knocking, face already tight, and pulled me inside without a greeting. "Avril called me," she said. 4 days ago." I stood still in her hallway, coat still half on. "Called you about what?" "She said she was checking on me. Asked how I was holding up with everything. Told me she knew this was hard on the whole family." Odalis wrapped her arms around herself. Then she started asking me questions. About that night. About what I remembered from the kitchen. "What kind of questions?" She kept saying things like, "You probably don't remember exactly when I was near the counter, right? It was so busy in there." Over and over. Different ways. like she was trying to get me to agree with a version before I even had one. Something cold moved through me, sharper than the fear I'd expected walking in. "She wasn't checking on you," I said slowly. "She was coaching you." Odalis nodded, and I watched something shift across her face. Not anger yet, something raw. Realization. "I thought she cared," she said. "I actually thought for a minute that she was scared for me too, and the whole time she was just—" She stopped, jaw tight. "She was managing me, same as she's probably managed everybody her whole life." "Odalis, I need you to tell me exactly what you told her back." "Nothing solid. I was vague on purpose. I didn't like how it felt." She looked at me, something new in her eyes now. "But if I say this in a deposition, that she called me, coached me, doesn't that make me look unreliable? Like I can't be trusted to remember anything on my own?" I didn't have the answer to that. Not with any certainty. So I called Verlinda right there in Odalis's kitchen and put her on speaker. "It doesn't make you unreliable," Verlinda said, once we'd explained it. "A call like that could be read as an attempt to shape a witness's account before testimony. That's the kind of thing a judge takes seriously, even without a criminal charge attached to it. It doesn't weaken your testimony, Odalis. It corroborates the pattern." Odalis was quiet a long moment after the call ended, staring at her own hands. "She really thought I'd just go along with it," she said finally, something harder settling into her voice now. "She thought because I was scared, I'd let her write the story for me." "Are you still scared?" "Yes." She looked up at me. "But I'm not doing this for you anymore, Fredonia. Not out of loyalty. Not because you asked nice. I'm doing this because now I actually understand what she is. And I'm not going to spend the rest of my life protecting somebody who was never protecting me back." I didn't push her further. I didn't need to. Something in her had settled into place on its own. The same way something in me had settled weeks ago in that hospital chair. Verlinda called back within the hour with a date locked for both depositions, Avril's and Cleophas's, 3 weeks out, on the record, under oath. The conference room was colder than I expected, all glass and gray carpet, Cleophas seated across the table with his attorney beside him, like a man bracing for weather. I sat beside Verlinda, close enough to hear her pen tap once against her legal pad before she began. "Mr. Redmond, on the morning of the wedding, you saw your wife's injury, correct?" "Yes." "What was your reaction?" He shifted in his seat. "I was surprised." "Were you?" Verlinda didn't raise her voice. "In your written statement submitted ahead of today, you acknowledged that Avril had spoken to you in the weeks before the wedding about, and I'm quoting that statement, handling the stepmother situation. Is that accurate?" A pause. His attorney leaned toward him, murmured something low. Cleophas cleared his throat. "She said something like that. I didn't think much of it." "Did you ask her what she meant?" "No." "Why not?" He looked at his hands. "I didn't want to know." Verlinda let that sit in the room a moment, long enough that even his attorney didn't rush to fill it. "You didn't want to know," she repeated, flat, not unkind, meaning some part of you suspected it could be something you wouldn't want to hear. "I don't know what you want me to say." "I want you to answer the question, Mr. Redmond. Did you suspect she meant to harm your wife in some way?" His attorney opened his mouth. Cleophas spoke before he could stop him. "I didn't want to think that about my own daughter." His voice cracked, thin and worn. "So no, I didn't ask. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself a lot of things that morning to keep from asking questions I didn't want answered." I felt something in my chest go very still, hearing it said plainly after weeks of watching him deflect it in every other room of our life. "So, to be clear for the record," Verlinda said, You had reason to suspect something before it happened, chose not to inquire further, and then, upon witnessing the aftermath, your response was to minimize it and ask your wife to remain calm rather than seek help. His attorney cut in sharply. Objection to form. Withdrawn and rephrased, Verlinda said, unbothered. Mr. Redmond, is that a fair summary of your own testimony today? Cleophas looked at me for the first time since we'd sat down, and whatever he saw in my face made him look back down at the table instead. Yes, he said quietly. That's fair. Verlinda made a note, unhurried, then looked up at opposing counsel. I'll note for the record, she said, that our divorce was finalized 3 weeks ago, which is what allows this claim against Mr. Redmond to proceed at all. I'll also note the criminal complaint against Averill Redmond for battery and involuntary drugging remains active on a separate docket, with a trial date already set for October. This testimony will be preserved and made available to the prosecution should it become relevant to that proceeding. Opposing counsel sat forward fast. We'd like to request a recess. Granted, the court reporter said, glancing at her watch. Cleophas didn't look at me again as his attorney gathered papers and murmured something urgent near his ear. I sat there a moment longer than I needed to, watching a man I'd shared 12 years with finally run out of rooms to hide the truth in, understanding that whatever came next wasn't something either of us could take back. Averill sat across the table with her hands folded, composed in a way that reminded me, uncomfortably, of every wedding planning meeting she'd sat through with the same practiced calm. Ms. Redmond, Verlinda began, walk me through your relationship with Fredonia Broussard over the past 12 years. Complicated. Averill's voice was even, rehearsed, but not obviously so. She married my father a few years after my mother died. I was young. I never asked for a replacement, but she inserted herself into everything. The planning, the decisions, my relationship with my own fiancé. Inserted herself. She was always there, always managing things, always positioning herself as the one who understood Desmond better than I did. A small, controlled breath. I think, if I'm honest, some part of me felt like I was losing my own wedding to her before it even happened. I sat very still beside Verlinda, watching her account take shape, smooth and plausible, the kind of story that might make a stranger nod along if they didn't already know what sat underneath it. So, when you say you felt provoked, Verlinda said, you're suggesting Fredonia's involvement in wedding planning justified what happened to her the night before the ceremony. I'm saying it wasn't as simple as everyone's making it out to be. Averill held her gaze steady. I'm not proud of the note, but I didn't wake up that morning planning to hurt anybody. Things got out of hand. For a moment, I felt something uneasy settle in the room. She was good at this, better than I'd given her credit for, and I watched two of the people present nodding faintly at her explanation, like it might actually hold. Let's talk about 4 days before the wedding, Verlinda said, unhurried, reaching for a folder. Did you speak with your cousin Odalis by phone? Briefly. I called to check on her. Did you discuss the rehearsal dinner? Not that I recall. Did you ask her anything about what she remembered seeing near the wine that evening? No. Averill's voice stayed even. I didn't discuss that with her at all. Verlinda slid a single page across the table. This is a call log confirming a 14-minute conversation between you and Odalis Marchand 4 days before the wedding. And this, she set down a second page, is Odalis's sworn statement describing that same call, in which you asked her, repeatedly, whether she was certain about the timing of events in the kitchen. The room went quiet in a way that felt different from every silence before it. Averill looked at the pages, then at her attorney, who said nothing. I don't recall the specifics of... You just testified you didn't discuss the rehearsal dinner with her at all, Verlinda said, still calm. Which is it, Ms. Redmond? Avril's composure didn't crumble into tears. It simply emptied out all at once, the practiced stillness in her face giving way to something blank and cornered. A woman realizing the story she'd built had a hole in it she hadn't accounted for. "I need a moment," she said quietly. Her attorney leaned in fast, whispering something urgent, and after a long pause, he addressed the room instead of his client. "We'd like to request that settlement discussions begin immediately." The settlement conference room held none of the tension the deposition rooms had. Just quiet and paperwork, and the particular stillness of people who'd run out of arguments. Verlinda sat beside me as the mediator read through the terms. Avril's counsel had agreed to civil liability for battery, damages set at a figure that would follow her for years, including the catering balance that had sat in my name since the cancellation, folded into the total rather than left for me to carry, with the criminal trial for the drugging itself still scheduled for October, separate and unaffected by anything signed here today. Cleophas's portion came next, liability for intentional infliction of emotional distress, tied directly to his admitted foreknowledge and his choice not to ask what his daughter meant. I didn't feel triumph hearing it. I felt something quieter, something that had been missing so long I almost didn't recognize its shape. The simple, unglamorous relief of being believed by people who had no reason to lie for me. Cleophas sat across the table, signing where his attorney pointed, and when it was over, he lingered near the door instead of leaving. "Fredonia," his voice was low, none of the old deflection left in it. "Can we talk? Just for a minute." I stepped aside with him, out of earshot of the others. "I know I can't undo any of it," he said. "But 12 years is 12 years. I keep thinking there has to be some way back from this. Some version where we figure out how to be a family again." I looked at him a long moment. This man I'd cooked for and waited on, and made excuses for longer than I'd admit out loud. And I felt no cruelty rise in me, only clarity. "There isn't," I said. "Not because I want to punish you, Cleophas. Because I finally understand I don't have to keep choosing people who only notice me when it's convenient." "That's it? 12 years? And that's it? 12 years?" I said, where I kept explaining my worth to people who'd already decided I didn't have any. "I'm done doing that. Not just with you. With anybody." He didn't argue. There was nothing left in his face to argue with. He nodded once, something resigned settling into his shoulders, and walked out without looking back. I stood in that hallway a while after everyone else had gone, Verlinda gathering her files a few feet away, giving me the space to just breathe. "You all right?" she asked eventually. "I think so," I said. For the first time in a long time. Outside, the afternoon sun was warm against my shoulders as I walked down the courthouse steps. I stopped near the bottom, out of habit more than anything, and reached up to touch my scalp. Soft, new growth coming in now, uneven still. But there. Undeniable proof that even the ugliest mornings don't get the last word if you refuse to let them. I didn't cover it. I didn't reach for a scarf or a wig or an explanation for anyone passing by. I just stood there in the sunlight, unbothered, and let it be seen.